the holiday of Tu B'Shvat, and we made those really nice pails that you could take home to recycle things in. You are actually going to celebrate that holiday later today in your activities, but we're moving ahead to the next holiday. The next holiday, I'm wondering if anybody knows what it might be. Have you ever been to a holiday where you dressed up in costume and made a lot of noise? Purim, that's right. So the next holiday that will be coming up is Purim. Can anybody tell me, well, I mentioned two things. What are the things that we know Purim for? Like, what are special things we do on Purim? The two I just mentioned were? That's right, we dress up in costume. And what else? We make a lot of noise. Do we know what we use to make a lot of noise and know what we call them? Anybody remember? For those of you who had me for Hebrew last year, you might remember the Hebrew name was Ra'ashan. Ra'ashan. But in English we either call them noisemakers or groggers. So you might hear some of these when you're going to services. So we have groggers, and in Hebrew it's Ra'ashan. You guys haven't learned your Hebrew letters yet, I just wrote it in English. So we make noise, but do we always make noise, or do we make noise for something specific? Does anybody remember? What do we hear that makes us make noise? Do you remember? That's okay, we're going to go over that today. You guys are going to have a chance. Are you comfortable with that? Because if you want, I can pull it a little bit away from you if that makes you more comfortable. You okay? Okay. So, today we're going to talk a little bit, yes?
It's Haman.
That's right, Haman. Okay, so whenever we hear the name Haman, you guys need to go, boo! And we're going to talk about the story today. So you guys ready? We got to test it out. I'm going to say it, and you got to be ready. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Haman! Okay. Now, I really didn't mean to say Haman. You got to be ready, because at any moment I might say Haman. Okay, now you're ready. Okay, so there are a lot of people that we talk about in the story of Purim, one of whom I will not mention because you might make a lot of noise, but that was this person's name. Okay. There's also a king in the story. Does anybody remember what his name is? It's okay, he has a big name. He kind of sounds like a sneeze. King Achashverosh. If I say that in small pieces, can you follow me? Achash. Say it. Achashverosh. So it's Achashverosh. Shverosh. Okay? So that's a king. God bless you. Achashverosh. Oops. He had a queen named Vashti. We'll talk a little bit about that. Some other important people that you'll learn about are Esther and her cousin Mordecai. So, why don't we talk a little bit about the story so you guys can remember. And just remember, at any moment I might say the word Haman, and you need to be ready. Cool. So, once upon a time, there was a king. His name was Achashverosh, and he liked parties. You know how much he liked parties? He had a party that was so long, it was a half a year long, 180 days. Can you imagine having a party that was that long? It's crazy, right? Well, after all that, you know what he wanted to do? He wanted to have another party for one more week. And he had all of his main people there, right? The men that he did all of his, leading with, all the most important men in his kingdom. And one day he said, you know what? I have the most beautiful wife in the world. Her name is Vashti. I'm going to call her because I want her to show off to all these people because she's fabulous. So the king told a messenger to go get his wife Vashti. And do you know what she did? She refused him. That's right, lady. She said, well, I'm kind of busy in my own party and I'm not going to be involved in that. So really, I'm not going to go. So when the king got the message that his beautiful wife was not going to come and show off for his friends, that was very upsetting. And you know what his friend said to him? Any idea what his friend said? His friend said, how can you have a wife who's not going to come over when you ask her to? If your wife doesn't listen to you and you're the king, what kind of chance do we have that our wives are going to listen to us? And they got the king all upset, and they said, you really need a new queen. You need to get rid of her. So sure enough, Ahasuerus says, you know what? I think you're right. We need to get rid of Vashti. Okay? So the king has now gotten rid of Vashti. What's the problem with that? He has no wife, right? So he needs a new queen. How do you think that you get a new queen? Do you think you can just go to a store and buy one? No, I don't think so either. His friends, the same people who got him to get rid of his wife, then said, I think you should have a beauty contest because your queen should be the most beautiful person in the land. And so women everywhere were trying to become the next queen. However, there was a family that we learn about, a man named Mordecai, who was Jewish, and he was very religious. He had a beautiful cousin, Esther, who had lost her parents when she was young, so Mordecai was raising her as his own, like a parent to her, like a mom or a dad. He was like a dad to Esther. And he said, you know what, Esther? I think you should become the next queen. And Esther trusted Mordecai, and so she went off to the palace to be with all the other women who were trying to become queens. And it wasn't easy to become queen. They had to get all of this makeup and all of this oil to make you skin smooth, and then all this perfume to make you smell as delicious as you could possibly smell. And this went on for months and months. But finally, when the time came for the king to make a choice, Esther became the new queen. So we have the king, there's no longer his queen Vashti, and Esther is the new queen. Now, Mordecai was worried about Esther because, let's face it, what does she know about being a queen? And she's never really lived away from him. So Mordecai would go to the palace every day and check on her because he wanted to make sure she was okay. The same way if you guys went somewhere, your parents would check on you to make sure you're okay. Mordecai did the same thing for Esther. One day when he was at the palace, Mordecai heard two guys. Their names were Bigtan. Can you say that? Bigtan. Okay. Can I hear all of you? 1, 2, 3. Bigtan and Teresh. Can you say that one? Excellent. These guys were the top people who worked for King Ahasuerus. The only problem was, you know what? They decided that Ahasuerus guy, he's not so hot. We should really be in charge. We should take over and be the next leaders of the city of Shushan and of the palace. We should be the next leaders of Shushan and the empire and the palace. Well, Mordecai heard Bigtan and Teresh making plans to get rid of the king. So you know what he did? He went to Esther, he got a message through to her and said, Esther, I was waiting out here to get news about you, and I found out these bad guys, Bigtan and Teresh, want to kick out the king, and they want to take over for him. Sure enough, people looked into the story and found out these guys were really no good, so the king no longer had them as their top advisors. They were no longer the big guys. Well, you know what? Remember how the king didn't have a queen, so he needed a new queen? Well, now he no longer has his top people and needs a top person. And you know who that top person was?